My name is Quinn Marshall. I'm 38 years old, and I never thought I'd have to fight my own family just to prove my daughter belongs. 9 months ago, I was finishing my last patient rounds when my phone buzzed with an email notification. I almost ignored it. Just another administrative message, but the subject line made my stomach tighten. Judge Richard Marshall, 30th anniversary celebration. My father, 30 years on the federal bench. I leaned against the nurse's station and opened the email, scanning the formal language about the Boston Federal Courthouse, the guest list filled with senators, governors, and donors. My pulse quickened as I read on. Then I reached the final line. This is a formal professional event. Attendance is limited to adult immediate family members. Adult immediate family. The words sat there carefully chosen, sharp, deliberate. Jennifer, the charge nurse, noticed my expression and paused beside me. Quinn, are you okay? I swallowed. My dad's anniversary celebration. Apparently my daughter isn't welcome. Her eyebrows knit together. What? Why wouldn't she be? I didn't answer. I already knew. I called my mother. She picked up on the second ring. Quinn, you got the email? That wasn't a question. What does adult immediate family mean, Mom? I asked, my voice tight. Lila is my daughter. A long pause, then a sigh. You know how your father is. There will be important people there. He doesn't want complications. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed again. A text from my older sister, Elaine. A photo appeared on the screen. Her son, my nephew, grinning proudly in a navy blue suit. Caption, ready for Grandpa's big night. My hands went cold. So this wasn't about age. This was about Lila. That night, when I came home, Lila was sitting cross-legged on the living room floor, building a crooked Lego tower. When she saw me, her face lit up like the sun breaking through clouds. Mom! She ran into my arms, all warmth and trust. I held her tighter than usual, breathing in the scent of her shampoo, feeling the fragile miracle of the life we'd built together. I promised her 3 years ago that she was safe, that she was chosen, that she was forever. So when the evening of the ceremony came, I dressed her in the navy dress she picked herself, and I took her with me. The courthouse glowed with chandeliers and cameras. When we reached the entrance, the receptionist glanced at her list, then at Lila. I'm sorry, ma'am. The child isn't on the guest list. That's my daughter, I said calmly. Before she could respond, I saw Elaine walking in hand with her son. Same age, same smile, same invitation. Lila looked up at me, confused. Mom, why is he allowed in? Before I could answer, security appeared. My father didn't even look at us. Minutes later, Lila was crying as strangers pulled us toward the exit, cameras flashing, whispers spreading like poison. Her small voice broke through everything. Mom, did I do something wrong? And that was the moment I knew. This wasn't just a celebration. It was a declaration of who my family thought mattered. The next morning, my face was everywhere. I didn't even have to open the news apps. My phone was buzzing so hard, it felt like it had a heartbeat of its own. Texts from coworkers, missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize, a voicemail from someone who didn't bother to introduce themselves before asking for a statement. But it was the headline that made my stomach turn. Judge Marshall's daughter disrupts court anniversary. A photo of me, jaw clenched, one hand gripping Lila's shoulder as she cried. The angle made it look like I was dragging her into chaos on purpose, like I'd used her as a prop. I sat at the kitchen table, the paper trembling slightly in my fingers, and stared at the image until the ink blurred. Across from me, Lila was quiet in a way that didn't match her. She was 9 years old now, old enough to read, old enough to feel things she didn't have words for. She didn't touch her cereal. She just kept picking at the edge of the napkin like it was fraying the way her sense of safety was. Mom, she said softly, barely looking up, am I allowed to be your daughter? The question hit me so hard I forgot how to breathe for a second. I stood up too fast, chair scraping the floor, and crossed the room to kneel beside her. I took her little hands in mine, warm and real and shaking. Listen to me, I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. You are my daughter, not allowed, not pretending. You're mine, forever. She blinked fast, like she was trying not to cry, because she'd learned crying sometimes made adults uncomfortable. It made me furious. Not at her, at the world that had taught her she had to make herself small to survive, and at my family for reopening wounds I'd spent years trying to heal. I should have stayed home that day. I should have shut my phone off. I should have protected my daughter from the noise. But by noon, the hospital called. Dr. Marshall, the assistant director said, voice carefully professional. We've got media outside the main entrance. We'd like you to use the staff entrance for now. For now. as if my life had become a temporary inconvenience. I hung up and stared at the wall, heartbeat slow and heavy. Then my phone rang again. This time it wasn't the hospital. It was Julia Bennett. Not my sister, not my mother. My law school roommate, the only person I knew who sounded calm, even when the world was on fire. She didn't bother with small talk. "Quinn," she said sharply, "do not talk to the press, not one word." "I wasn't planning to," I muttered. "You'd be surprised what people say when they're scared. Your dad's going to move fast. He's not going to let this become a story about prejudice. He's going to make it a story about you being unstable." A chill ran through me. "I'm a pediatrician," I said. "I'm not—" "Doesn't matter," Julia cut in. "Power doesn't argue truth. It argues perception." I looked toward the living room where Lila sat curled up on the couch, hugging the throw pillow she always grabbed when she felt unsafe. "I just wanted her to be included," I whispered. "I know," Julia said softer. "But you didn't just embarrass him. You embarrassed him in front of people who matter to him. That's different." After we hung up, I did what I always did when I was trying not to break. I went back in my mind, back to the moment everything started. Because this wasn't the first time my family had looked at Lila like she was a problem. It was just the first time they did it with cameras. 3 years ago, I walked into room 3002 on the pediatric ward, file in my hand, expecting another routine consult. The chart said, female, age 4, severe malnutrition, signs of neglect, no known birth parents, removed from foster home. Dry words for a story that felt like a punch to the chest. She was sitting upright on the hospital bed, small shoulders hunched, like she was trying to make herself take up less space. Her hair was thin in places, her cheeks hollow, and her eyes? God, her eyes. They were too big for her face, too alert for a child that young. Like she'd learned the world was a place that watched you, judged you, waited for you to mess up. A social worker named Rebecca Hale stood beside the bed, arms crossed, expression tight with the kind of exhaustion people get when they've seen too much cruelty and can't fix it fast enough. "This is Lila," Rebecca said quietly. "She doesn't talk much. She's been through it." Lila's arms were wrapped around a stuffed rabbit so worn the fur had faded into patches. She held it like it was the only thing in the world that hadn't left her. When I stepped closer, she flinched. Not dramatically, not like a movie. Just a small, practiced recoil, like her body had memorized the idea that adults get close before they hurt you. I lowered myself into the chair beside the bed, leaving space between us. "Hi," I said gently. "I'm Dr. Quinn. I'm here to help you feel better." Her gaze flicked to my stethoscope. She stared at it like it was a weapon she didn't understand. After a long silence, she pointed at it with one shaky finger. "That listens to hearts?" Her voice was so quiet it sounded like she wasn't used to hearing herself. I nodded. "It does." She stared at me for a moment, then whispered something that changed me forever. "My heart hurts," she said. "Not here." She tapped her chest once. "Here." She tapped again, lower, like she meant something deeper than her ribs. I felt my throat tighten so fast it scared me. I forced a smile, the kind that doesn't demand anything in return. "Then we'll take care of that too," I promised. "Okay?" She didn't nod. She didn't smile. But her fingers loosened slightly on the rabbit, like she was considering the impossible. Trust. Over the next few weeks, I found myself in that room, more than I needed to be medically. I brought her tiny cartons of chocolate milk once her stomach could handle it. I sat beside her while she colored in silence. I learned the exact moment she got overwhelmed. Her shoulders would rise like she was bracing for impact. And slowly she started speaking to me. Not long conversations. Little fragments. A word here, a question there. Enough to show me she was still in there, buried under fear. One afternoon, Rebecca found me in my office, leaning against the doorframe like she'd been waiting for the right time to say something. "She only talks to you," she said. "With everyone else, she shuts down." I swallowed, staring at my hands. "Is that normal?" Rebecca gave a bitter laugh. "Nothing about her situation is normal. But yes, kids like her pick one safe person and cling to them like a lifeline." I thought of Lila's eyes, of her rabbit, of the way she flinched when anyone moved too fast. And I heard myself say it before I even realized I'd made the decision. "I want to adopt her." Rebecca stared at me. "Quinn, adoption isn't—" "I know," I said, voice shaking. "It's paperwork and home studies and court dates and fear, I know." Then I looked up. "But I also know this." My chest felt like it was splitting open, but the words came anyway. "I can't send her back into the system. I can't." That night, I drove to my parents' house in Newton because I still had that foolish belief that family meant safety. The Marshall living room looked the same as it always had. Polished wood, framed photos, the quiet hum of wealth that never had to explain itself. My mother, Evelyn Marshall, stood near the window with her hands clasped too tightly. Elaine sat on the sofa beside her husband, eyes darting, like she already knew which side she'd choose but didn't want to say it yet. And my father, Judge Richard Marshall, sat in his leather chair like he was presiding over a trial. I placed a photo of Lila on the coffee table. "She's 4, I said. "She's been abused. She's alone, and I'm adopting her." Silence. Then my father spoke, voice calm in the way that always made people listen. "Are you serious, Quinn?" "Yes." His eyes dropped to the photo, not with warmth, not with pity, just calculation. "My position," he said slowly, "isn't some private hobby. It's a legacy." I felt the first flare of anger rise in my chest. "That's your first response?" I demanded. "Not congratulations, not she's beautiful, not—" Elaine's husband cleared his throat, uncomfortable. Elaine leaned forward, whispering like she didn't want to be heard, but she wanted me to hear anyway. "How will it look in family photos?" That sentence was like a slap. My mother finally spoke, soft and pleading. "Richard," she said, "Quinn has always wanted a child." My father didn't look at her. He looked at me. And in that look, I understood something that made my skin go cold. He didn't see Lila as a child. He saw her as a headline waiting to happen. As a complication. As a stain. A few weeks later, when Lila was discharged, I brought her home to my apartment in Beacon Hill. She stood in the doorway with her little backpack, rabbit tucked under her arm, eyes scanning the room like she expected someone to jump out and tell her she wasn't allowed to stay. She looked up at me. "Not Mom, not yet." Just my name, careful and unsure. "Dr. Quinn," she whispered, "is this forever?" I knelt in front of her, heart pounding, and I took her hands in mine. "Yes," I said, voice breaking. "This is forever." And I meant it. Back in the present, as my phone buzzed again with another unknown number, I felt my hands curl into fists. Because my family had never forgiven me for choosing Lila. They'd just waited for the right moment to punish me for it. And now that moment had arrived. My phone lit up with a new message. From Elaine. "Dad's talking to lawyers. Quinn, be careful." I stared at the text until the words felt like they were burning into my eyes. Then, as if the universe wanted to prove Julia right, there was a sharp knock at my front door. Not a neighbor's polite tap. Not a delivery. A firm, official knock that made my blood drain from my face. I opened the door, and a court officer stood there holding a sealed envelope. "Dr. Quinn Marshall?" he asked. My mouth went dry. "Yes." He handed it over. "You've been served." Behind me, I heard the soft sound of Lila's footsteps. Her small voice came from the hallway, trembling with fear she couldn't hide. "Mom, are they going to take me away?" And in that instant, something in me hardened like steel. Because I realized this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was war. I didn't answer Lila right away. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because every possible answer felt like a lie. The court officer had already turned and walked down the hall, footsteps fading, like he'd just dropped a bomb and left me alone to deal with the fallout. I stood there holding the envelope, my name printed in heavy black ink, while Lila stared up at me with wide, terrified eyes. I forced myself to kneel. I cupped her face gently, thumbs brushing away tears she didn't even realize had started to fall. "No," I said slowly, choosing each word like it could shatter if I wasn't careful. "No one is taking you anywhere. Not today. Not ever." She searched my face the way children do when they're trying to decide whether to believe you. "What if they say I don't belong?" she whispered. My chest tightened. I pulled her into my arms, holding her close enough to feel her heartbeat against mine. "Then they're wrong," I said, "and I'll prove it." The envelope contained exactly what Julia had warned me about. A formal request for a custody evaluation filed by my father, Judge Richard Marshall. My hands shook as I read the words over and over again, like they might change if I stared long enough. Concern regarding the child's emotional welfare. Questions about the adoptive parent's stability. Recent public behavior, raising red flags. Red flags, because I'd refused to let my daughter be erased. Julia arrived within the hour. She didn't hug me. She didn't soften it. She took one look at the paperwork and exhaled slowly. "He's doing it," she said. "He's actually doing it." I felt numb. "He's my father." "He's a judge first," Julia replied quietly. "And right now, he sees you as a liability." The hearing was scheduled within days. Too fast, too deliberate. At work, things shifted almost immediately. Colleagues who used to stop by my office suddenly avoided eye contact. Conversations hushed when I walked into the break room. One nurse pulled me aside and whispered, "Are you okay?" Like I was already fragile, already suspect. Then the school called. The principal's office smelled like coffee and disinfectant, and the woman sitting across from me wouldn't quite meet my eyes. "We've received concerns," she said carefully, "from other parents." About what? I asked, already knowing. She folded her hands. About family stability. About whether Lila is settled. When I picked Lila up that afternoon, she ran into my arms like she always did, but this time she was crying. Mom, she sobbed into my coat. Macy said her parents read something online. She said Grandpa wants to take me away because I'm not really yours. I felt something snap inside me. I crouched down, gripping her shoulders gently but firmly. Look at me, I said. You are my daughter, no matter what anyone says. She nodded, but I could tell the damage had already been done. That night, I found her curled up under her desk with a flashlight and her photo album. Her safe place. The same place she went when the world felt too big. I sat on the floor outside her little bunker, heart aching. Did the astronauts make it back yet? I asked softly, referencing the space documentary we'd watched together. Silence. Then, in a tiny voice, she asked, "What did they say about me at court?" I froze. You know about the hearing? Macy told me, she said, voice shaking. She said judges decide where kids go. I took a deep breath and spoke gently, honestly. They said they want to ask questions. That's all. No one decides anything without the truth. She crawled out slowly, clutching the album. Pointing to a picture of us on the beach, she asked, "If they win, will I have to leave you?" Tears blurred my vision. I pulled her onto my lap. "No," I said, voice steady despite the storm inside me. "I promise you, I will not let that happen." The courtroom was colder than I expected. Judge Ellen Hart presided, neutral, sharp-eyed, professional. My father sat across the room, not in robes, but still radiating authority. His lawyer spoke smoothly about concerns, about my reckless decision to bring a child into a public confrontation. I wanted to scream. Instead, I stayed still. Julia stood and spoke calmly. "This case isn't about the child's welfare," she said. "It's about control. Judge Marshall allowed one grandchild of the same age to attend his event and forcibly removed another. The only difference was which child fit his image." My father didn't flinch. When the judge ordered psychological evaluations for both me and Lila, my stomach dropped. But Julia squeezed my hand. "This is good," she whispered. "They'll see the truth." Outside the courtroom, I spotted my sister, Elaine, standing alone. She wouldn't meet my eyes. "Did you know?" I asked quietly, "before he filed?" Her lips trembled. "He said it was for Lila's good." I laughed bitterly. "And you believed him?" She said nothing. That night, I lay awake, listening to Lila breathe, wondering how my own family had turned love into a legal weapon. And when my phone buzzed, just after midnight, with a message from Julia, "Your father's reaching out to journalists. He's preparing to destroy you publicly." I realized something terrifying. This wasn't just a custody fight. It was a campaign. And my daughter was the collateral. The weeks leading up to the final hearing felt like living inside a slow-motion collapse. Every morning, I woke up with the same thought pounding behind my eyes. What else can they take from us? First, it was the press. Articles started appearing that didn't use my name directly, but didn't need to. Sources close to the Marshall family questioned my emotional stability, my workload, my ability to parent alone. They painted a picture of a woman who was well-meaning but overwhelmed, someone who'd made a selfish decision and was now spiraling. Then, the hospital director called me into his office. He wouldn't look at me. "Quinn," he said carefully, fingers folded on his desk, "this situation is becoming distracting." I stared at him, disbelief burning in my chest. "I have worked here for 11 years. My patient outcomes are not in question," he cut in quickly, "but parents are nervous. The board thinks it would be best if you took temporary leave." Temporary. Just like my dignity. Just like my stability. I walked out through the back entrance that day, past reporters shouting my name, my hands shaking so badly I had to sit in my car for 10 minutes before I could drive. When I got home, Lila was unusually quiet. She didn't ask about my day. She didn't chatter about school. She just followed me from room to room like she was afraid if she lost sight of me, I might disappear. That night, as I tucked her in, she hesitated. "Mom?" "Yes, baby. If the judge says I have to go somewhere else," her voice cracked. "Will you still look for me?" The question sliced through me. I sat on the edge of her bed and took her hands in mine, pressing my forehead to hers. "I will always look for you," I said fiercely, "no matter what. But I won't need to, because you're staying right here." She nodded, trusting me with the kind of faith that made the stakes unbearable. The final day of court arrived gray and cold. Courtroom 6 was packed. Lawyers, observers, a few journalists pretending not to watch too closely. My father sat across from me, posture perfect, face unreadable. Not once did he look at me like a daughter. I was a problem to be solved. The psychological reports were read into record. Strong maternal bond. consistent caregiving. Child exhibits secure attachment and emotional progress. I felt a flicker of hope. Then my father's lawyer stood. He spoke about my long hours, my lack of extended family support, the emotional damage of the courthouse incident. He played the video, Lila crying, me pulling her close, security dragging us away. My heart shattered all over again. Julia stood slowly. The child cried because she was humiliated, she said, voice steady but sharp. Because she was singled out and rejected by her own grandfather while another child, also his grandchild, was welcomed. That trauma was not caused by my client. It was caused by discrimination. The judge leaned back, eyes thoughtful. Then, just as she opened her mouth to speak, the courtroom door opened. Everyone turned. Elaine walked in. My sister looked nothing like the woman who'd sent that smiling photo months ago. Her face was pale, her hands trembled, and beside her stood her son, holding her fingers tightly. I'd like to testify, Elaine said, voice shaking but clear. My father turned around sharply, shock cracking his composure for the first time. The judge raised an eyebrow. State your name. Elaine Marshall, she said. Judge Marshall's daughter. The room went completely still. Elaine took a breath that sounded like it hurt. I've stayed quiet too long, she said. I watched my father treat Quinn's daughter as a liability instead of family. I watched him plan this case not to protect a child, but to protect his reputation. My father stood halfway. Elaine. She turned to him, eyes wet but fierce. You told me this was about Lila's best interest, she said. But it wasn't. It was about how she looks, about how she doesn't fit the picture you want powerful people to see. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Elaine went on, voice gaining strength. You met with influential people who made it clear that a non-traditional grandchild was inconvenient. That's why my son was allowed into the ceremony, and Lila wasn't. Then something happened that none of us expected. Her son stepped forward. He looked small standing there, but his voice didn't shake. I love Lila, he said simply. She's my cousin. I don't understand why I got to stay and she didn't. My throat closed completely. The judge raised her hand as my father's lawyer began objecting. Elaine produced emails, messages, proof. The judge read silently, face darkening. When she finally spoke, her voice was firm. This court finds no basis for removing the child from Dr. Marshall's care, she said. Furthermore, I find the use of this court to advance personal interests deeply troubling. My father stared straight ahead, jaw clenched. I felt like I was breathing for the first time in months. Outside the courtroom, I saw a familiar face taking notes, a well-known investigative journalist. Our eyes met, and in that moment, I knew. The truth wasn't done yet. 9 months have passed since the judge said the words that changed everything. The child will remain with her mother. At the time, I thought relief would feel louder, like a rush, like triumph. Instead, it felt quiet, heavy, like finally setting down a weight you didn't realize had crushed your lungs until it was gone. The fallout came fast after that. An investigation opened into my father's conduct, his use of influence, his communications with political allies, his attempt to weaponize the court system against his own daughter. Within weeks, he resigned. Officially, it was for personal reasons. Unofficially, everyone knew. The man who taught me to believe in justice had broken it to protect his ambition. Senator allies distanced themselves. Invitations stopped coming. The image he'd sacrificed a child to protect dissolved anyway. My mother retreated into silence. We speak now, but carefully, like people walking through the ruins of something that once felt permanent. She's apologized, not loudly, not dramatically, but in small ways. Food dropped off. A hand resting on Lila's shoulder, a second too long, like she's afraid the moment might vanish. Some damage doesn't heal cleanly. It just scars. The hospital asked me back after public opinion shifted. I returned, but something in me had changed. I no longer believed institutions would protect you just because you were right. I believed in one thing now, my daughter. On a warm afternoon in Boston Common, I sit on a bench watching Lila run through the grass, laughter spilling out of her like it finally has somewhere safe to land. She's chasing her cousin. 2 kids, same age, same joy, no rules about who belongs. Elaine sits beside me, handing me a coffee. They look happy, she says softly. They are, I reply. That's what matters. A shadow falls across the bench. My mother stands there, older than I remember, smaller. She watches the children with a look that's half wonder, half regret. They're growing so fast, she murmurs. Yes, I say. They are. Lila runs over breathless, face flushed with excitement. Mom, Grandma, we found a frog. She grabs my hand without hesitation, without fear, without question. And in that moment, I understand exactly what we saved. Not a reputation, not a legacy, not a career. We saved a child from growing up believing she was a mistake. We saved her right to feel chosen. If you've ever been told, by family, by society, by people who were supposed to love you, that you didn't quite fit, I see you, and I hope you found someone who fought for you the way I fought for her.